Hello, friends and dairy products of all ages. This is Cheese of Ages, speaking extra dramatically, in order to make up for the lack of video with this recording. This is audio only for various reasons, but there you go. Today we're talking about skills and skill dice in Dungeons & Dragons Next, and as well as what was said by Mike Merles and the lot in the DnD Next Hangout that was recently recorded. Again, before they actually had the opportunity to get the feedback from the people that were in the playtest, and thus negating half the point of the D&D Hangout. Also, I'm going to be a little bit harsh with Mike Merles and the lot because of several things they said in this particular D&D Hangout, because personally I think it shows how out of touch they've become with the whole design process. Now, some of the key things they said defending the skill system are backing that particular assumption up, but for the uninitiated that aren't aware of what skill dice are, and my issues with the skill dice system is essentially, your skill dice, you get, when you are getting skill training, you get a skill dice instead of a static value representing your skill training. Now, I quote from the D&D playtest packet, each background gains training in 4 skills. Training in a skill reflects an area of expertise in which a character might have raw talent, education, or both. Your training is represented by a die called skill die. I repeat, your training is represented by a die called a skill die. And this starts at a D4, and by level 20 is increased to a D12. You only get a single die. And when you make a skill check, you may roll a D20, you add your ability score modifier that is relevant to it, and you roll your skill die. Now, previously, you would do the same thing, but instead of a skill die, you would get a static value representing your training. My issue with this, and the fundamental aspect of I'm going to be harping on throughout this expanse of this video, is that your training, as stated in the materials, your level of training is represented by a random variable that can be from 1 to 4, and later 1 to 6, and later 1 to 8, and then later 1 to 10, and then after that 1 to 12. Essentially, this means you are suddenly getting more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable every 6 seconds, nonsensically and randomly, rather than being a set established amount of training. Mathematically it might work, and this is one of the things that's put forth to defend the skill dice system, but intrinsically this is representing level of training. That is the entirety. Your sole representation of your training is this dice, and that means your level of knowledge goes up and down every 6 seconds. When you go to pick a lock, you are suddenly 5 points more trained than normal when you roll that d6 at, second level and above. And then you go and you pick an identical lock a moment later, and then suddenly you are 4 points less trained than you were when you picked the other lock. Some people will argue this represents like random happenstance of making a mistake, but no. That's the whole point of the D20. The entire system is built around the D20 representing random happenstance. Some people will say, oh, the skill dice roll means you either remembered something or you didn't remember something. You forgot it, it slipped your mind. This doesn't make any sense for relatively mundane tasks, the process by which is unchanging, like picking a lock or forging a weapon or stuff like that. Doesn't make any sense for that. And also, what this intrinsically creates is a problem of random elements being represented twice, and more deeply entrenched in two random elements being represented, random element being represented twice, because let's go ahead and say, hey, this represents you forgot something about it. This is taking away the D20 representing you forgot to do something. Even though that's one of the things the D20's always done. The skill dice now represents your level of knowledge, and forgetting something is synthesized by, the D6. Now, what this problem this creates is now the D20 doesn't have any point at all in knowledge-related checks, because the entire resolution of a knowledge skill is based in the fact that you are trying to recall information. So if your level of knowledge and you are forgetting or not forgetting something is based in the skill die roll, what the heck is the D20 doing? It literally cannot do anything mechanically, because everything it would do mechanically is represented by the skill die. I mean, if skill dice is going to represent recalling or forgetting something, as if some people are defending, that essentially means that the D20 does not do anything other than factor in, oh, maybe somebody hit you in the head, because it only represents random happenstance affecting the resolution of the knowledge check. Is if your level of knowledge is entirely represented, if the random element of forgetting or recalling more than normal is represented by the skill die, it's taking away the only thing the D20 would do to the check at all. And that means either the D20 is pointless, or the D20 is representing the same thing again. And that's just bad game design. Why are you representing random elements two different ways? Mathematically speaking, they combine into one check, but you are contributing two random factors to that roll. People are saying, no, it's only representing random chance once. No, it's not. You are applying a random dice and a random dice in the one check. Just because it's one check doesn't mean that two random factors involved aren't two random factors. Now, one of the things I'm just going to freaking tear to pieces as far as this goes, one of their main defenses for this is that skills are no longer a resolution system. They are a role-playing system, and thus my entire tirade there is not a point, because it's no longer a resolution system. Dudes, you're rolling a dice in order to get a result. That's a resolution system. Not only that, but please, this is going to sound harsher than I intended, but dudes, get your head out of your ass, because all you're doing, you're just touting about how your system is all roleplay oriented, and is all these game mechanics are roleplay oriented, and everything is roleplay infused, and hey, that's good. I like a system that encourages and is stout in roleplay, but you're not designing roleplay here. You're acting like you're designing roleplay. You're not designing roleplay, you're designing game mechanics. And the sole aspect of a system, the entire point of a game system is game mechanics and resolution. The game system is by definition, the entire damn thing is a resolution system. So saying that something on a mechanical level in that thing is not a resolution system is saying it's not a game system. I might be blowing it slightly out of proportion, but it's the truth. Every aspect of a game system is based around governing the resolution system. Roleplay is in no way affected intrinsically by the system if it's done right. Sure, the system enables things to happen. It governs things and enables you to do these things that you would be doing within the rules of the system and the world, and make sure everything is balanced and working properly. That's because it's a resolution system. It doesn't give you the idea of the roleplay. It doesn't put the freaking roleplay tools in your hands, intrinsically speaking. That's the domain of the player and the DM. That's one of the things, and I think this is why you're doing this, is because people complain that there was no roleplay in 4th edition, even though you took the proper design element and presented a resolution system as the game system, because that's what a game system's supposed to be. And then people were complaining about null roleplay, even though that's the freaking domain of the DM and the players. Now, I've already said it. I enjoy the aspect that it's infused with roleplay and everything like that, and it's supposed to be to a level. But if you start stepping into the territory in which your game system is no longer a resolution system, or aspects of your game system are not a resolution system, you're misguided. Your head's up your ass towards the freaking catering to the, idiotic role players that don't know how a game system actually works. I'm sorry, that's just fact. A game system, every single aspect of it, even character customization, is a resolution system. And even intrinsically, if it's not going to be a resolution system and it's like roleplay based and everything like that, and it's not going to work as a resolution system, newsflash, unless you completely change the game mechanic, you gotta actually, in order for it to not be a resolution system, you have to take away the roles. If you're going to take a skill, and you're going to roll a die, and then you're going to roll another die, and then you're going to add a number to it, it's a resolution system. You're resolving something that you're governing the resolution of a part of the game. That's a resolution system, no matter what you want to call it. I'm sorry. And if it's a resolution system, that means it's got to be based in game mechanics, and then have an infusion of role-playing elements. And you know what? That line, it basically just amounts to bullshit. About it, this is not going to be a resolution system. Skills aren't a resolution system anymore. You're veteran game designers that have been doing this for 20 freaking years. You know it's a resolution system. You were just trying to explain why your skill dice system doesn't make a goddamn bit of sense. And a mechanical or even even a roleplay standpoint, the entire mechanic at its fundamental level is flawed intrinsically for reasons I've stated already. I'm sorry, but I hate this mechanic as it is currently written. It makes no goddamn sense from a design or a role-playing standpoint. Why? Why is the representation of your skill training in all instances and applications of that skill training a variable number? You do not suddenly go out and go to try and make something you've made 1,000 times and then forget an aspect of it or know things you didn't know before, because that's what skill training is doing. If your level of knowledge of something is a variable number, that's what it's amounting to. And no, I'm not complaining that it hurts the player. I know you can only get bonuses from it. Even if you roll minimum, you can only get a +1. You still get a bonus to it. But it's representing a set value with a random number. Sure, you can forget things. Sure, you can be a little bit more knowledgeable in a set area of expertise. Sure, it can represent things. Well, maybe you don't know a little bit as much about this particular area, or maybe you know a little bit more. But guess what, people that have said that to me in defense of the skill die system? That was already in the D20. It's representing that twice. It doesn't add a dang thing. So, now that we've established that it makes no sense and adds nothing to the game that wasn't already in there, except mathematics, the entire point is to more easily resolve. The entire point of this is because the static values, they weren't freaking... It was tricky to get the balance right, because at high levels it would make DCs completely lopsided because it's a static value. So they decided to fix the problem by saying, oh, you have a random variable that can increases, your top side increases. This way I can progress it, make it stronger without actually giving you a consistent hard point win kind of thing. You don't have a 6 or it's a 8 or to it, or a ridiculously ludicrously high number. You have either a 1 or a 12. It's overly mathing it and balancing out the math of the D20 towards median averages and stuff. It's entirely based in mechanics and not at all based in synthesizing roleplay. And they tout about being more roleplay infused, but they introduce an element that is entirely there for mathematical purposes and actually has no roleplay justification. They talked about all of these things, like how it enables them to do things like broadening options, making it with, they can handle like, oh, you roll a skill dice for all strength checks. Oh, you do this because you were a fighter, and this because you were a thing. And it enables us to have these like packets of skills and modularity. Newsflash: static bonuses did the same damn thing too. You just need to tweak the freaking math. And you call in that tweaking the math is the easiest thing to do, but that's freaking apparently not the case, considering you had to introduce this mechanical system to fix a mathematical problem that wasn't even there to begin with, to an extent. You could easily adjust this in a different way. I'm not even a freaking 20-year veteran game designer, and I can come up with a better freaking way to regulate the difficulty escalation than this. You know what? I'll present it right here. I'll do you one good. Static bonus and skill training. Most of your skill progression comes from gaining new skills rather than increasing your existing skills, but periodically all of your skills increase by a little bit, like 1 point. It's like, oh, I'm level 5, so I get a +4 instead of a +3, or something like that. I haven't plotted out the exact freaking progression, but that's not really my job, is it? It would still work reasonably fluidly. I say at level 20 you've got like a static +5 or something like that. It's a reasonably slow progression. The large majority of your progression in the ability to do things should be in an ability score progression. And that way, where the static value, the extra number from your skill, can remain static and unchanged as long as possible. Most of your ability to do things coming from increasing your ability scores. Do that. What's so hard about that? Why you gotta introduce nonsensical? Oh, and another thing they use to defend this point is it's easier to remember a dice that's sitting there in front of you. If you didn't roll that dice, it's right there in front of you, so you know you didn't roll that dice. But you can easily forget like a number on your character sheet. But that's kind of silly. If it's a static value, and it applies to all your skills universally, as the old system was, it's basically... you're going to be checking that for that value anyway. If you've entrenched in your head, oh, I've got to add 3 to a skill I'm trained in, and you're not sure if you're trained in it or not, you've got to look at your sheet to see if you added dice to it, and see that skill training. With the static value, you see, oh, I've got skill training. You're checking your sheet anyway to see if you've got the training to roll the dice, so you're looking at the number that would be there anyway. And if you don't even need to have the number there, if you remembered that the +3 is there. So it kind of defeats the purpose if you're looking at your sheet anyway. Because you're checking your sheet anyway, and there it is right there reminding you to do it. It's like, here, add this. It's right there. It's stupid. Oh, and a dice on the table, and you can remember to roll the dice because it's right there in front of you. Even if that even if that was the case, what about those people that like put all the dice they need in a pile? All together, like their damage dice. Let's say they roll the D12, and then they roll a freaking D6 for their skill die, and they roll like a D20. They've got all of that stuff in a pile with all their like the D4, the D12, the D6, and the D20. What's a new player gonna look over to that pile and remember? He's still got to freaking think about what to set aside for that and lump it aside. And it'll occasionally get like pushed back into the pile even if you set the skill dice aside, separate from the main pile. And the new player is going to be like, oh, which one of this pile do I roll for my skill die result, or forget it completely? It's not going to universally fix this problem. It's going to get freaking, the large majority of the time, it's just going to get lost in the pile of dice you set aside. Or they'll roll the wrong one. And here's something that you might not have considered previously. Explaining skill checks. I've said this in the comment sections of my videos. Explaining a skill check was relatively simple, concise, and great. It's like, okay, you want to make this check. You're gonna try and spot something in the environment, see if anybody disturbed the thing. You're gonna try and search for something naturally based. So you're trained in this nature. You're trained in wilderness lore, and you're trying to find something. So, okay, roll a d20, add your wisdom, and then add 3 because you're trained in wilderness lore. Easy, simple, concise. Roll a d20, add your training, which is +3, and then add your ability score modifier. Reasonably simple, concise, one sentence, easily understood. Now, here's what the new skill dice means. Okay, so roll the d20, and then roll. Let me start over. Roll the d20 and add your ability score modifier. And now here's this additional game mechanic you have to learn. Here, roll this dice. Why am I rolling another dice? What is it? Didn't I already roll a dice? This makes no sense. Even if they get that, they go, oh yeah, I roll a d20. I do roll a d20 and I roll a d4. I'm sure I'm not the only one, a DM or player that's played with a new player. It's like, oh, what do I roll for this? Like, oh, a d20? Oh, yeah, okay. And it's like, yeah, I rolled a d20 for this, right? Oh, I roll a d20 for this, right? And then I can trench in their heads that say, roll a d20 for this. And then they're like, okay, let's add a skill die to this situation. They get in their heads that they roll a d4 for their skill die. Finally, they have to ask constantly, over and over again, which one do I roll? And then they finally get it entrenched in their head, and then they level up. Yeah, that's right. This creates a complication right off the bat, because suddenly the new player hits second level and his skill dice changes. What he rolls for his skill die is no longer a d4. So he's like, oh, I rolled a d4 for this. No, you don't. Why? I'm freaking out. Why don't I roll this? Did I do it wrong? Have I been doing it wrong the entire time? Oh, no. Oh, I rolled a d6. Okay, it leveled up. Oh. And next time they make a skill check, they grab a d4 and like, oh no, you don't have to roll a d4. What? Oh yeah, d6. Yeah, that's an intrinsic design problem. Because your mechanic changes this the very freaking time first time you level up, right off the bat. Not noob friendly. The skill dice are not something that should be a core base rules mechanic for the most simplest thing, because completely new players are just going to find it completely, they're completely new to role-playing, are going to just find it kind of weird and unintuitive. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. So, it adds nothing, adds complexity while adding nothing. Why is it there? Oh, it's dynamic and variable and adds excitement. Sure, that's fine. It could be nice, a nice optional mechanic, or a nice supplementation. I mean, it works good with rogue skill tricks, but here's what you should do. If you want to have skill dice in there, you should work it where there's a static bonus. And if you want to, you can roll a skill die that could result in you being lower, or result in you being higher. But you do not add your static bonus if you roll your skill die. That way, both the static bonus and the skill die can exist without upsetting any mathematical advantages. And I'm not a veteran of game design, and I came up with that. Oh, well, let's look at it from a complexity standpoint. If you just want a simple thing and you don't want to touch the skill die, you don't have to, because the static bonus is there and it's reasonably good. It'll do you, just fine. But if you want to tap into that, it's oh, well, I really need to make this check succeed, so let's take the chance, let's gamble a little. It's there. It adds a little element there without adding any unnecessary complexity if you don't want it there. And it's still reasonably concise. Let's explain this new method of doing skill checks. Oh, roll a d20, wisdom, add it, because it's a wisdom check. Now add your trained in wilderness lore. Okay, add 3. So, there. Okay, if you want to, you can instead roll a d6 and, see if you can do a little extra, something. Well, it's oh, well, do I add my training? No. Oh, okay. That could cause some complications for the new player, I'll admit. Well, he'll, roll the skill die and add his training bonus still. But, still. It's something that's there. It's an option. It's an optional rule set. Go ahead and put put that in there as one of those optional rules there for more one of the more advanced options. There's more fluidity there for once you've gotten your hands on it. And even the DM could basically just, put it aside until you've learned how this works. I'm going to just put it here and let you know it's there, but you don't use that until you've fully accumulated it, and I'll remind you of it occasionally. It's doable, it's workable, and you could slowly introduce it to a player, easily and intuitively by taking it in your own hands. But as it is written, I will not be, in fact, implementing skill dice into my games of D&D Next. And if it's in this form in the final book, I will not be adding it to my game, and I will be house rolling it out. And I'm probably not the only one that's going to be doing that, and despite the fact that I was freaking lambasted in the D&D Next comment section for that. It should be an optional rule. That's the main thing I'm saying, because intrinsically, from my perspective, it doesn't make any sense. And that bullshit about skills no longer being a resolution system and being a character customization system. One, they've already been a character customization system from the get-go, and even in this current format, they are still a resolution system, and there is no way to make skills a non-task resolution system. Even if you keep them mechanically identical to how they are right now, they are still a resolution system. If you move away from them being a resolution system, you can't have any roles in it, and it's basically saying, I do this because I'm good at it, and that's not sure, that's not a resolution system, but that doesn't fix the people's problem with having an I win button. You have to arbitrate whether they succeed or fail, and arbitrating whether they succeed or fail is a resolution system. I'm sorry. If you don't like what I've said, if you disagree with me, feel free to commentate and tell me where I'm wrong. I voiced pretty much all of my complaints with this skill dice system and explained it concisely. So, anyway, this is getting long. So, this is going to be Cheese of Ages signing off.